price for what they survived. A personality, a VIP, history in the headlines. Whatever happened to, let's get the latest news. Hey, whatever happened to you?
This edition of Hey, Whatever Happened To is brought to you by these fine sponsors. Hi, I'm Doug Thompson on behalf of the Kansas Auto Racing Museum in Chapman. There's a lot to see at the 15-acre racing complex. Did you know the first NHRA event was held in Great Bend in 1955? We have the original film footage, original correspondence between Sunflower Club for Great Bend and the NHRA. We even have the first NHRA trophy. Come visit us Monday through Saturday, 9 to 5, and be sure to bring the family. Relive racing memories of the past. Experience a celebration of speed that continues in racing today at the Kansas Auto Racing Museum.
Need a rock-solid building at a rock-bottom price? Sentinel Buildings is your answer. Sentinel's all-steel buildings are custom designed to your exact needs. Engineered with the highest quality materials and workmanship and backed by Sentinel's promise of ongoing hassle-free service and support. Whether for agriculture use, commercial, or storage, you'll live with your building for years. Get it right the first time. Contact your local Sentinel dealer or call Sentinel Building Systems today. Sentinel Buildings, rock solid.
Welcome to Whatever Happened To, a famous Kansan. This is a program about famous Kansans. We have researched throughout the state and found that there are numerous Kansans that need to be identified and their story told, and today it is my honor to present one of these Kansans to you. I'm Roger Thompson, the host of Hey, Whatever Happened To. Our guest today is United States Army Airborne Lieutenant General Richard J. Seitz, retired. Welcome to the program, General.
Great to be here, Roger.
Thank you. This is going to be a 30-minute program, and with the history that General Seitz has, we can't possibly get everything into this 30 minutes, so we're going to carry on the interview on our website, which is entitled heywhateverhappenedto.org, and you can see the entire interview on that website. Before we get started into this program, I want to give you folks a history about the greatest generation and about World War II. We're going to be discussing primarily World War II and some other highlights of General Seitz's career. During this interview, I am probably going to refer to him sometimes as Dick Seitz. When I do that, I'm not being disrespectful. We were neighbors for 10 years. We've known each other for about 35 years. For me to refer to him as General Seitz is like calling my father Mr. Thompson. So if I make that mistake, understand what it is, and I'll live with that.
Well, Roger can call me Dick because he was the best neighbor I've ever had in my life.
Well, and he returned the favor, but I want to address that subject a little bit. I moved in next door to General Seitz. We were both in the same branch of the government, of the Army, the same branch of military, the Army. Now, if you're Private Thompson and you move in next door to 3-star Lieutenant General Seitz, don't you think you're going to be a good neighbor? But he returned the favor many times, and I enjoyed that 10 years that we had together, and I've enjoyed the 35 years that we have been able to visit with each other off and on. I want to tell you what happened to this greatest generation. Most of these folks were born sometime between 1900 and 1923. During that period of time, the United States was building an industrial complex. Things were going very well. The 1920s was called the Roaring Twenties. It was a time of prosperity. Although most of the greatest generation were toddlers or young people, it was not possible for them to get all the benefits of the great 20s. The Midwesterners, General Seitz is a farm boy from up north on the northeastern part of the state. Farming was going very well. Wheat was $5 a bushel. Every piece of ground in the Great Plains was being turned over and turned into wheat land instead of the prairie ground that it had been. Everything was fine, couldn't couldn't be better. World War I had just ended in 1918, and we were rolling right along. Then suddenly in 1929, the stock market crashed. This was the beginning of the Great Depression, which essentially lasted about 10 years. This Great Depression was a terrible event in the lives of this generation. There was no food, soup lines. People would stand in line for hours to get a cup of soup. If you were on the farm, there were no crops. We had no rain. There was dust bowls, and the people that survived that tell me that this dust bowl, there would be, one lady described it as saying, turn a tornado from upright to sideways, make it about 400 miles wide and 10,000 feet tall, and nothing but dust rolling along. It covered your house, it covered all your vehicles, it ruined all of the crops. And the Midwesterners, people from Mexico to Canada were not the only people who suffered from this dust bowl. On many occasions, these clouds would make it to the East Coast. New York City folks realized what the dust bowl was like and what we were going through. This is what these guys were born into. If you were a farmer, the government said, your cattle's not going to make it. We'll dig a big trench on your farm, pay you $1 a head for your cattle, and kill them. If you have cattle that are suitable for butchering, we'll pay you $16 for them. Farmers had no choice, ranchers had no choice, they had to take it. Many people died during this time because of what's called dirt pneumonia. Their lungs filled up with this fine dust. This is the setting for this great generation. The next thing to happen to them after they survived this depression was World War II, and it dropped on them like a ton of lead. When we return, I'll start with World War II and tell you how well we were prepared for that incident. We'll be right back. Thank you.
Hey, whatever happened to you?
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Whatever Happened To. I'm your host, Roger Thompson, with Lieutenant General retired Richard J. Seitz. We were giving you a little history about what life was like for the great generation. We've now reached World War II. During this time of the Great Depression, President Roosevelt was trying to get people employed. He was trying to put money out there for families. He was trying to end this depression. And he did WPA, a lot of different works. Dams were built, highways and things like that. The reason I tell you that is because we weren't spending a lot of money in the 1930s on war material. The World War I had ended, and some of those countries that had been major players in World War I were preparing for war at a later time, primarily Germany. Adolf Hitler, a fellow with no discernible skills, except he could give a good speech, convinced the people of Germany to put him into power as a dictator. He promised them nationalism. He promised them there's going to be justice for criminals. He told these people whatever he had to in order to get himself into office. The other thing Hitler did in 1933 was pitted the Germans, the Aryan race he would call them, against the Jews. And during this period of time that Hitler was the dictator of Germany, he immediately in about 1934 seized Czechoslovakia without firing a bullet. He seized Poland, sent as many Jews as he could into Warsaw without any food, without any care. He banded Jews with a band on their shoulders. Throughout the period of time that Hitler was a dictator there in the 30s, he caused the death of, including the war, 15 million people. Many of them were Jews who were loaded up into stock cars and taken to gas chambers, who were put in concentration camps and received the worst possible treatment. It's easy to throw these numbers out, but let me tell you what it was like in 1940 for 15 million people to be missing. That was the population of Kansas, Nebraska, Missouri, Oklahoma, Colorado, and Wyoming, which means had those people been taken from those states, you would have driven across the middle of the United States for a distance of 800 miles and there wouldn't have been a soul. That's what it's like to take 15 million people out of the population. That's who this man was. On December the 7th, 1941, the Japanese bombed our Navy at Pearl Harbor. We lost over 2,400 sailors. It was a surprise attack, totally unexpected, and we were caught as a country totally unprepared. This great generation that I'm telling you about had to make some serious decisions. Many of these folks quit school. Many of them left the farms. I'll tell you how many left. 16 million in 4 years would wear our military uniforms. 6 million women picked up the jobs that their husbands and brothers and sons had been doing, and those jobs included everything we needed at the time. We needed war materials. We needed tanks, guns, uniforms, boots, bullets, aircraft, submarines. Our Navy had almost been totally destroyed. We needed ships. And these people went to work because they realized the urgency of what had to be done at this point. And one of the fellows that was involved in this was my friend Dick Seitz. He was a 1939 graduate of Kansas State University. And I guess my question for you, Dick, is what brought a Kansas farm boy with a degree in 1939 K-State to World War II?
Well, I'd just been commissioned a second lieutenant in 1940, and really I hadn't yet graduated from K-State. I was laying out a year to get enough money to go back and finish my degree. And I got called to active duty during that period, February of 1940. I was a brand new second lieutenant, went to San Antonio, Texas, and was part of the 2nd Infantry Division. I was called only for 6 months because everybody thought the National Guard and the reserves would only be called up for 6 months. But about the end of the 6 months, I got a notice, you are extended for the duration.
I've heard many World War II vets say the same thing. There was no limit to how long you would be in the Army.
And I was not a particularly good lieutenant. But right then I said, Seitz, get with it. And I knuckled down. About that time, they were starting the paratroopers. And I wasn't particularly happy in the outfit I was in. So I volunteered for the paratroopers.
You
and
violated rule number 1 of the military.
Voluntary.
Yes.
And so I was accepted, one of the early ones. And as I said, I started to knuckle down, learn my trade, and became a pretty damn fine lieutenant.
Were you in the 1st Airborne class then?
No, I was in class number 6. There were 8 people in our class, 8 officers. Jim Gavin was one of my classmates, and we became friends, and he took me under his wing, and I joined his company.
I see. All right, and where did you go to? Was Airborne School? Was that in Benning?
That was at Fort Benning, Georgia.
All right, so it's always been there pretty much.
Yes, it has.
Okay. And that course was how long?
At that particular time, it was 3 weeks.
All right.
And matter of fact, the course today is 3 weeks, and it's about the same as it was then.
Okay.
Lots of physical training, lots of running, lots of benching.
Well, I know about the running that you did. We'll discuss this again in a minute, but we're going to take a break so my brother can pay some bills. We'll be right back. Thank you.
Hey, whatever happened to you?
Welcome back to Whatever Happened To. Our guest today is Lieutenant General Richard Seitz. He was just telling us about his experience at Benning and that there was hard work for those guys that spent their 3 weeks at Benning and how he came to be in the Army. One thing that he said at the end was, they put us into shape and they made us run and they made us physically fit. I met him in General Seitz in 1976, and we were neighbors at that time, and he was running around the golf course at 5:30 in the morning in combat boots. I thought that was kind of different. I thought two things at the time. I thought, number one, he had just retired in 1975 from 35 years in the military. When I saw him out there and I got to know him, I realized I never wanted to retire. It was too much work. And so that's what happened. But anyway, Dick, obviously you've maintained your level of physical fitness from those early days. And
yeah, I think it's sort of ingrained in me to keep in shape.
Yeah, and you certainly have done that. All right, you finished your airborne training. What happened to you after that?
Well, I went up to Fort Bragg and took command of a company. It was I Company of the 503rd Parachute Infantry Regiment. And obviously I couldn't keep a job because next thing you know, I'm the battalion S3. And then I'm picked up and sent back to Benning as an instructor, and I was not particularly happy about this. But while I was there, I was selected to be a battalion commander in the 517th Parachute Infantry. And the 517th at that particular time was a separate combat team.
Are you telling me you were a second lieutenant that filled the staff officer position, company commander positions? These are captain and majors.
I got promoted to first lieutenant pretty quickly, and I got promoted to captain fairly quickly.
I see, all right.
And matter of fact, I was just lucky as hell in being in the right spot at the right time.
You told me that one time in 1977. I asked you, how does a guy get to be a three-star general? And you told me, lucky, right place, right time. Yeah. And that summed up 35 years of your military career. And now I look into it, I have to disagree with you about part of it. Number one is the Battle of the Bulge, where you spent a lot of time, was not the right place, or the right time. We'll get into that. But obviously you moved up the rank quickly.
Yeah, I say this with a great deal of pride, I became the youngest battalion commander in World War II.
I'm aware of that, and it's been written in many of the history books that you were the youngest commander, battalion commander in World War II.
And that aged me rapidly.
All right. So you're moved into position now as a battalion commander of what kind of a unit?
517th Parachute Regiment.
Okay, part of the 18th Corps. Were they part of the 18th Corps at that time?
Not at that particular time.
Okay.
They became part of the 18th Corps when the Bulge started.
All right. Did at the time you became a commander of the 517th, had war started? Had the Japanese?
Oh, yes. The war was about, well, I went to the 517th 1943. So the war was 2 years old.
I see, all right.
About 2 years old.
Yeah. And then you and your battalion, where did you end up in 43?
In 43, we were at Camp Toccoa, Georgia. It's about 80 miles west of Atlanta.
Were you shipped overseas then?
We went to Italy from that place. And we got to Italy, we're involved in ground combat to get our skills in order. And we had about 2 or 3 months of combat in Italy. And then we're pulled back to a staging area just outside of Rome to prepare for a parachute jump into southern France.
And where in southern France would you have been going to?
Le Mouille, France. It's about 15 miles in from the coast of Nice. So we jumped in there on the 15th of August, about 14 or 15 15 miles behind the German lines. And when we landed in Lemuy, we then proceeded north up the Rhone Valley, protecting the 6th United States Army right flank. And we continued in that role, from the 15th of August until the 6th of December. And after about 70 or 80 days of continuous combat, we were pulled out and shipped by 40 and 8. That's that World War I boxcar. 40 humans, 8 horses.
Oh my.
And we went from that point up to a place called Soissons. And we arrived in Soissons, France, on the 6th of December.
All right. So you left the battle around Nice.
Yeah.
And then you went to...
Up the north, up the Rhone Valley, they call it.
All right. And were you engaging the enemy all the time?
All the time. We were in contact every day.
And you were essentially a light infantry.
Yep. No vehicles, everything on foot.
Oh my word.
Yeah, we arrived at Soissons on the 6th of December. Everything was peaceful. The fronts were stable. We were having a great deal of success. The Americans were. And we were making plans for our Christmas holidays, you might say. Little did we know that the Germans were preparing for a massive counterattack.
Bye, everybody.